Okay, it's 10:30. I'm going to start. Can people hear me in the back? Wave if you can hear me. Yeah, awesome. Okay. So this is Tweakers Anonymous. Hi, I'm John. I'm a tweaker.
Hi, John.
Yay, 12-step humor. So my name's John Anderson. I'm GNAC Online. I rep DCPM, and you're in Madison. So I was going to call this talk originally An Elegant Weapon for a More Civilized Age, because then it gave me an excuse to use this great Yoda graphic with the Lambda lightsaber, and I was going to talk about Emacs. But instead, I decided it'd probably be more useful for people if I gave a talk that wasn't editor-specific, not so much how, more what, and applicable to any programmer's editor. So what's a programmer's editor? You need to have syntax highlighting, you need to have indentation support, and you need to have some minor amount of programmability to sort of get in the door. So syntax highlighting. It helps you catch stupid typos faster, basically. That's the reason why you should do this, because if you type the wrong thing, it doesn't turn the right color. It can also obscure code. So I've had bugs that I could not see until I turned the syntax highlighting off, because something was a color that was making my brain just not see it. So you want to be able to toggle it, right? Set your editor up so you can flip it on and off. They can all do that. You just have to figure out how to do it. Indentation support. I'm just going to steal Dominus here. You can't do good work with bad tools. So if your editor doesn't auto-indent, like if you hit tab and it doesn't go to the right spot, like just fix that. Like get a real editor. And then programmable, right? You don't have to use Emacs. It doesn't have to have an entire language embedded inside of it. You don't need to be able to play Tetris in your editor, although it's nice. If you can select some text, pipe it to an external program, get the output of that external program, and replace what you had selected, you're good, right? That is 90% of everything you ever need to do. The take-home message of the talks, I'm going to give this, and the people who are already like, wow, editors, can go see some other talk. Pay some attention to what you're doing. This is generally good advice, but also when you're programming, pay some attention to what you're doing kind of around the code you're actually writing. Configure your environment so that the stuff you do all the time you can do really fast. Or even better, configure your environment so that the stuff you're already doing all the time just happens automatically anyway, because you're already doing it all the time, and computers are good at doing stuff for you. There's a lot of young faces in the room, so I thought I'd mention the F keys on the keyboard are not just to control your MP3 player. The F stands for function. And the idea is you bind stuff to those keys that you do all the time, and then it's right up the top, and you just hit that one key. And then finally, keep your configs, your editor configs, your shell configs, whatever. Keep them in Git, because at some point you're going to tweak something and totally screw it up. And if it's in Git, you can revert it and go back to the working version. All right, so who's done this, right? You open up Vim, you write your awesome script, hack, 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 save it, go to run it. Oh, sad trombone. And then you have to go in and manually chmod it. Well, don't do that. Every editor you can configure so that if you're editing a script, it automatically sets the execute bit for you. The top line, the auto command, will do it for Vim. The bottom, much longer, more verbose line will do it for Emacs. Commit messages. Set up your revision. Everybody's using revision control, right? So set up your revision control system so that you can write your commit messages in your preferred editor. There are shell variables that will let you control this, so that when you go to check something in, the editor that pops up you write your commit message in is the one you normally use. Vim people can go, well, that doesn't happen for everybody, because Vim is the default editor on most Unix systems. Emacs people, there's this thing called Emacs Client. So basically what you can do is pop up a new instance of your editor that's in the same running session as you have open in your Emacs. Which is really nice, because then you can look at the code that you're committing and use that to write your commit message. Code formatting and tidying. Same idea here as make executable and save. You're going to hook into the save method in your editor, and then before you save your file, you run Perl tidy on it and save the output of Perl tidy instead of saving the file. Keep your saved files tidy all the time. If you don't want to do that, maybe Perl tidy's too much. Both Vim and Emacs have settings where you can do things like automatically delete trailing white space. Please turn this on, everybody. I'm really tired of seeing little red squares in Git. So please make me happy and turn that on. Syntax checking. I have one trick, really. This whole talk is one trick. Do stuff around saving files. During the file save, after you save it, run Perl-C on the file that you just saved and complain if there are problems. So that if you introduce a typo or some sort of stupid syntax thing, you find out about it right away. Even better than that, syntax checking on the fly. So we will now go to the ill-advised live demo portion. I'm going to do it. I'm going in. Okay, so I'm going to write a little Perl script. Opt Perl then Perl, because that's where my Perl lives. And I'm not going to use strict. I'm not going to use warnings. I'm going to type them in. Oops. But then I'm going to comment them out. And I'm going to have a variable. It turned red. Why did it turn red? Well, it's because I have syntax checking turned on. Can people see that? So I'm getting the actual error message from Perl-C. And even though I don't have strict and warnings turned on, because when I pipe it through the external Perl, I do pipe it through with strict and warnings regardless of what's in the actual file. And then when I fix the error, formatting goes away. Right, so this is actually running Perl-C in the background and showing the errors. This is awesome. This saves me so much time because just stupid typos you catch right away instead of in the middle of a compile cycle. There's a version of this for Vim as well. It's called FlyMake. It's awesome and you should turn it on. FlyMake, F-L-Y-M-A-K-E. Even better than syntax checking on the fly, you can also do some static analysis on the fly. So if I can get back to my editor. Let's do a new thing. I'm going to make a file called foo.pm. And then I'm going to have the package line bar.pm. Why did that turn red? Oh, I'll just call it bar. Now this is turning white instead of red. That's because this error isn't coming from Perl-C, it's coming from Perl Critic. Perl Critic is complaining because now I have a package name that's different than the file name, and that violates one of the default Perl Critic rules. So this is also awesome. Will help, particularly if you work on a larger project or you work in an environment where you have a set of Perl Critic policies. You can know right away if there's a problem if you're violating the policies. Okay, so that was even more ill-advised demo. Yeah, that's also FlyMake. It's just you can hook it so that it runs multiple things, basically. You can set up your editor to let you do code and documentation browsing, probably more useful to the Emacs people. The Vim people are just going to Control-Z and be back in the shell and use PerlDoc there. Emacs calls this find file at point, which I love because it abbreviates to FAP. Vim has a command called goToFile, or GF, and basically the way this works is I bounce around and don't get back to my editor. Say you use Moose. If I put my cursor on Moose and give the open file command, it doesn't work. So basically what this does, find file at point. This is why you should never do live demos in your talk, because stuff doesn't work. If you have your editor configured properly, when you go to open a file with your cursor in a package name, it will actually open up the source code for that package, which is useful. You can do the same thing for documentation and bounce to, like, for example, running Perl.doc Moose based on having your pointer on Moose. Autocomplete. It can't be done perfectly. Just because Perl's a dynamic language, we don't always know what a variable is. If you're trying to autocomplete methods off of an object, you don't know what that object is necessarily. You can't do it perfectly. You can do it fairly well. You can actually spend approximately 3 days and do a whole lot of stuff in the background so that when you hit tab, it'll be just like Java in Eclipse. You'll get like a list of methods, and it's awesome. It's very fragile. It's not worth it. Don't do it. Like, if you find yourself at the point where you're really considering doing this, stop and you have real work that you should be doing. This is the point when you have a problem. Learn from my lesson. Both Vim and Emacs can be set up to do something slightly different, where instead of trying to intelligently autocomplete, to try to figure out what type of object is in there and look up all the methods with PPI and do all this cool stuff in the background. You can instead use something that Emacs calls Hippie Expand. It's called Hippie Expand because it looks at all the things, man. So basically all Hippie Expand does is look in every open file you have for every word and tries to then complete the words you're trying to complete based on the contents of the open buffers. So that, 80% of the time, that's all you need. Vim has something similar. So please do that. So the more subtle take-home message, right, the bigger message from this talk, is that there are about 5% of the people in the community, and I'm one of them, care about this stuff way too much, right? These are the tweakers, the anonymous tweakers, or the not so anonymous tweakers. But bigger problem is that 80% of us don't care about it enough. I see a lot of people, like when I pair or when I just watch somebody program, there's a lot of people doing a lot of manual, repetitive stuff that they could automate. They could set up their editor to do it for them. And it's worth taking the time to do it. If you're not sure whether or not you have a problem, you probably are in the don't care enough problem camp. So the editor, right, the thing that I want people to take away from this talk, other than I didn't have nearly enough stuff to fill the time, is your editor is one of your primary tools that you use in practicing your craft, right? You're at a YAPC, you're taking time out of your life to come listen to nerds talk about Perl, so presumably you care about Perl or programming a lot. Right? This is something you do. The editor, after the shell, is probably the tool you use the most. Spending some time to make it work better for you will make you work better too. And it's time worth doing. Just take an hour, right? It's a good thing to do when you're listening to a boring talk. Tweak your editor config, put it on GitHub, share it. The less friction you have around things that you do frequently, the more chance you have to get into that great flow state, right, where the outside world vanishes, it's just the code and the problem and the beautiful thing that happens in your head, which is awesome. But if you're constantly struggling with your editor, it's much harder to get into that place. If you can get to the point where the editor kind of fades away and it's just an extension of your forearms, and the typing just kind of happens, it's awesome. And it's worth taking the time to do that. These are my configs for Emacs and for Vim. The Emacs, I'm primarily an Emacs person, so the Emacs one is a lot more extensive. But there is stuff in the Vim one too. Look at them, steal stuff, fork me. And I'm happy to take questions now. And there's those URLs again.
That was going to be my question.
There's a version on SlideShare. I'll put this version up. It'll be SlideShare/GNAC. And it'll be under there. Yes, sir. Right. So what I do, you can configure how often it fires. So you really, like, that needs to be tweaked, actually. It's very important. It's a good question. Out of the box, FlyMake tries to fire, like, every second, which is really, so basically you pause for a second, it fires off. It's really annoying. And you can potentially fork bomb yourself, basically, because it fires off the one and you start typing and it forgets about that one and you stop again. And so it's bad. It's a real problem. What you do is dial that down so that it only fires after like 5 seconds of idle, or you can set it up. For a long time I ran it so that it only fired. I had to do a manual save and then it would fire off. That's sufficient. The autocomplete is another thing where you can really sort of screw yourself. Most of the autocomplete stuff relies on PPI. So if you have, like, a lot of the code I write looks like this at the top. And when you start trying to do autocomplete and PPI starts trying to do the entire Moose ecosystem and things just go, that's another reason not to use autocomplete, basically. Just don't open stuff from people you don't know. Oh, man. So what he's referring to is there are, like, you're evaluating code. So if somebody sends you something that has, like, a begin block that does, system rm-rf, bad things are going to happen when you run that through Perl-C. It's a risk you accept. There's no way to make that completely safe. It's just never going to happen. Yes? What's correct syntax highlighting? Okay, I see what you're asking. For Emacs, I don't know what the solution is for Vim. I don't know if there is one. For Emacs, there's something called MMM mode, which stands for multiple major mode.
Yo, dog.
And that's basically what it is. It's, yo, dog, I heard you like mode, so I put a mode in your mode so you can mode while you're moding. It's a little kludgy and doesn't work that well. The better solution, particularly for Perl, so the default, well, it's not the default, but it's the one everybody uses. Perl mode for Emacs is called cPerl mode. It handles HereDoc. I mean, it'll syntax highlight a HereDoc as documentation. There's a template toolkit mode that does a very nice job of handling HTML and template toolkit code at the same time as well. But the MMM mode is a little kludgy and requires a bit too much faffing around for my taste. So I mostly just don't worry about it. Sorry. All right, thanks.